Hey guys, so this blog's about to get a lot better. I've been thinking more about how to make it useful, and I think the best thing to do is to focus clusters of things that are happening around themes and ideas, wisdom and strategies, so it has more of a topic and relevance and applicability to your own life, or whether it's startups or anything you can glean from my mistakes or thoughts. And then also things more relevant to actual progress clusters in GameTree, as opposed to just doing sort of a series of events of things that are happening. That's just sort of a random chronology that's not that useful. So in this blog update week, I'm going to be talking about the results of a brainstorming session of what we're doing with the short-term roadmap and why. And so thoughts around that. A little blurb about like the importance of relationships, because I've been finding these to be super important in making GameTree happen, and how these have been helpful lately in the cluster, and also advice from my own point of view about why and how to kind of build these and use this. Some more focus around testing assumptions and the strategy we're using to like do things locally and how we're entering the market, and also announcing GDC plans, a little blurb about comfort with risk, and also a little more updates on exploring crowdfunding and the strategy we've chosen and why. And also, lastly, to update about a possible new team member who's going to be helping us out for a few weeks and might actually become one of the core team, and how that came about and how I'm approaching that situation. So, development roadmap, we essentially do team meetings where we have as many people on board as we can. Originally, they were smaller, but we realized that by having more people, more brains, it's better. And also, if there's developers there, they think from the developer point of view, the designer thinks from the designer point of view. It just kind of works out better. And so we've figured out a short-term roadmap. We're going to be doing a news MVP so that people have more stuff to do in the app. And in the past, we develop a lot based on what we hear a few people say, and then does it make sense to us? But now we're more diligent about asking more people and posting on the feed and asking for feedback and just getting more market research before deciding to commit to things. Because something that might make sense for a few people doesn't make sense for everybody, or it might not be the time yet. We did have this problem with game sessions where people are using it now, but I envisioned it being a thing where people could have a habit of when they want to play a game, it'll be an easy way to coordinate with friends or to find new people or fill extra spots. And it turns out that that does work, and that is a thing that's needed and demanded, but it doesn't work at our scale, and it's not something that everybody wants. As we have more users, it becomes more useful because people want things instantly, and that's something I should have tested and had a hypothesis about and asked people is like, is this something you'd use now if you had to plan in advance? Because there aren't enough users to make it instant right now. And so that turned out to not be the right stickiness thing. The newsfeed, though, there is a huge amount of demand for it. We've done a lot more research. I don't know if our MVP will be enough because it's more like filtered news without the machine learning added. But we'll see how that goes. But at least it's something that will be very useful and applicable. We've also had a lot of issues of people being confused with all the functionality of the app or what it is. So having an important dashboard page where it just says like discover, friends, games, events, a thing about improving your recommendations so people know that it's about that, and they can click it to give us more data and understand why that's useful. And then it goes right into the newsfeed, all on the front landing page. So it'll be a really great page to show off for explaining kind of what the whole app does, which is hard to describe to people. Super functional and very quick and easy to use. It cleans up like half of our menu options and makes the app actually more usable. So very excited for that. Another thing is we're adding sending images. It doesn't relate that much strategically to a lot of our goals, but it's requested so often, and like every other chat functionality has it. Even though we're not trying to compete on chat, that sending images is something we just have to do. Also, event locations we're putting in because we're going to be testing the market, as I mentioned, locally in different places, and we also need to prove that assumption. Speeding up the app launch, and we've also decided to have a kind of more hardcore mode of GameTree for the more hardcore gamers, because we've discussed rebranding. I think the answer is just to have like a dark mode be a hardcore mode, maybe even a slightly different logo, and then also having some screens designed for what WeTree could be, the later stage of GameTree, with recommendations for all things, just to have visuals for that, and it's easier to explain. So, importance of relationships. The relationships that I've had and developed so far have been completely pivotal and vital to getting this far. Even myself, being from like a wealthier background with a lot more advantages than most people have, being born in California as like a white male, it should be so much easier for me than for other people. And even still, there's no way I could be doing this without the people helping along the way. And in general, my approach with this is that like I view GameTree as the most important thing in my life, where other stuff is kind of secondary to making this purpose happen. Not everybody's like this, but I think that that's a necessary thing if you're going to try to build something big. And so when I'm selecting friends, like I don't view my friends just for the sake of my happiness. I'm very loyal to like existing friendships, but in general, I try to pick friends to nurture relationships with who somehow their visions and life purposes align in some way or cross section with my own. Because without that, the main purpose for my living isn't going to get done. So what I do is try to pick just people who I think are good people who I trust or who have good hearts or aren't toxic, that somehow can like cross paths with, and then specifically invest more into those people. It's not like 100% thing, but I try to bias in that way whenever possible. I know to some people it's going to sound kind of crazy, depending on personality, to have some sort of agenda sometimes, but it really is important. To other people, it's going to be super obvious. But I think it's the overlap of people you actually like with potential to do business. With this, what I've been doing is as a way to kind of foster more people and also helping them introduce each other. And it's a lot nicer to have a group of friends than just a bunch of one-on-one relationships. I think that's something really hard to do nowadays, especially if you're doing a lot of business or moving like I do, is actually organize hangouts. I really like getting people over, and we'll play games, like simple social games and drink, or more hardcore board games from time to time. And it's a way for people to meet each other and they have a lot of fun. Speaking of which, I also host big parties sometimes. Not big, but maybe 40, 50 people. And there's actually going to be one in Kiev. You're welcome to come, and it's going to be the Friday after this one. So that would be, I guess if it's February 18th, I think it's like March 1st or something. So if you happen to be in Kiev, you're welcome to come. And it'll be a really huge variety of people. I mentioned it in another party, but like artists and business people and technical people and political people, it kind of all mixed together, but they're all people that I trust and that seem like good vibes. So you're welcome to come to that. But that's also another kind of a tool for being able to bring people together and to just have a presence when I otherwise can't spend time one-on-one with so many people to build these relationships. So in terms of the relationships, it's come in handy over and over again. A friend, Brent, he's somebody that I've been one of my closest friends since high school, and he just invested $10,000, and he actually even seeded the last startup I was working on as well. He's now the head of sales of Amplitude, which is a little bit strategic, but mostly it's just that being here in Eastern Europe is really hard to get funding, especially for this kind of a company that's in gaming and early stage with a longer term payout horizon. So having those relationships is super important because people invest in the people they trust at the early stage or the mission, but here it's not as easy to get the mission funding. So having relationships is vital. Like I don't know where else I could have gotten the money. On top of also my sister and her boyfriend also just investing more money, and I wasn't expecting to ever have to come to them. But that's something that's like, because I'm on good terms with them, that they're willing to put that in. There's a guy, Alex Kuda, who's in charge of Restream, and I like him, and he's actually going to be giving us a few streamers to test some assumptions that we have about the need for streamers to be able to predict ratings so they can know whether or not they should stream a game or if they should promote a certain game from a brand, and also be able to see all the games that their audiences are playing and what the statistics like them are like. They've expressed interest, but I don't have the money or the relationships with streamers for them to be willing to get synced with users on Facebook or on GameTree to test that, because that requires them to actually send some people to us. But if it works out, then it's a proven model, and that could be really big growth and monetization stream. And it's through the relationship with Alex who's willing to test that where other people never would be. Similarly with Nikita, as he was brought in as sort of like an expert counsel on a possible investment opportunity that somebody recommended. Nikita's way of thinking is extremely data-driven and more short-term, like Eastern style, where he wants to see things be profitable very quickly. And even while interviewing us, like I felt like I was like under like a microscope or like in the hot seat. And towards the end, I started to shift things more personally, and like started to just be like getting to know him personally and what is he like and what are his interests and stuff. And he started to warm up, and instead of it being like trying to poke holes and everything, it became more collaborative. We're like, okay, like how can we work together, or how can this work? And it's almost like we're on the same side exploring it instead of adversarial. And since then, we've hung out a bunch of times, and I see him being somebody I'll be friends with for a long time, like ideally forever. And he actually offered to send us a bunch of users that he has, he ended up sending us thousands of users through another service that he has for gamers, but they turn out to be the kind of the worst possible kinds of gamers, people who are just spamming and clicking to get free stuff. But he's actually going to be then investing like real money into our target market and that funds that we don't have to be able to start testing what does the app look like at scale when there's a lot of people in a small area with a specific limited set of correlated games to each other, so that he knows what's GameTree going to be like. It's going to test some AI platform that he's built for advertising, and also he wants to know if this is a good investment opportunity. So it's because of that relationship that he's willing to do something like this, because otherwise he doesn't have a problem testing it with other people, for example. Another one is Maciek, the guy that I met in Poland at Contact Improvisational Dance. Like, he's going to become an advisor for us and maybe be joining our team, and he's already proving helpful with a lot of coaching and feedback and helping organize my thoughts. So it's just kind of crazy the amount of like, this is all just in the short term, things that come together when you have people sort of on your side who are willing to help. Because when you're the little guy, all the bigger players don't care about you. I can't make deals with bigger companies right now because the first thing is like, oh, well, I have like 500,000 followers and you have less than that. So like, talk to me when you have like the same amount as me. But when you have relationships, for example, Alex being willing to set us up with the streamers who are kind of beholden to his company, then that makes things a lot easier. So another topic is testing assumptions. My own psychology, as I'm somebody who's very rooted in my own thoughts for values and answers, and I'm also rooted in my own thoughts for organizing patterns and looking for answers, as opposed to looking for like data or dealing with like strict logic or looking to the tribe for answers. That's just my style. So I'm trying to get more clear about quickly testing assumptions externally and being very clear about stuff. One thing with this that we're going to do is try to get a lot more gamers in Warsaw locally to be able to work with this. The last presentation I gave, I met this guy, Robert, who's in charge of a community of over 30,000 people in Kiev, mostly expats, but not totally, where he leads basically the most social events. And like a lot of them are gaming, maybe a third, I'm guessing. And we just got along super well, and he's like a really warm person, so I really want to work with him. And he's trying to scale so that he could do things outside of Warsaw, and we're trying to work within Warsaw. So we've met again and have good partnership opportunities. So this is a good strategic way to be able to get GameTree out, promoted at these events that are already going on. And then once we have 200 or 300 people locally, in addition to maybe the 40 or so that we already have in Warsaw, then we can go to gaming stores and then say, hey, there's already a few hundred people here. Do you want to list your events? And then when they list their events, then they could also tell people to download GameTree so they know when the events are happening, and to be able to find teammates for board games or miniature war games as well that they might not be able to find teammates for, and it opens the trust. And I think we can actually build some sort of ecosystem here by cross-feeding like the social meetups with the board games and the board game stores with each other, and maybe even start interconnecting and expanding and increasing the activity rate within the gaming industry. So that's sort of a lucky strategy to target a market. And that's something that I haven't had experience with before, but it really works piggybacking on existing communities and having the right strategic partners. So in the future, when we're scaling into other markets, I think that's a good strategy of like, what's a community that we can align our interests and repeat this playbook every time, instead of trying to like give out flyers or go to everybody individually. It's sort of a sequence of things that logically build on each other. So also we'll be at GDC. If you are going to be there, come say hi, because we're going to have a booth. And also we have a few extra tickets. I'm trying to sell them because we need the money, but they'd be at like a 50% discount. But if you want to go and we haven't sold them, reach out and maybe we can just give them to you. GDC booth is going to be pretty sweet. Family business has some booth stuff in San Diego. So actually, like, my mom and sister are going to drive up a booth and then help set it up. And then my brother, who's a hardcore gamer and specializes in business development, is going to come halfway through the week, and they're going to leave and help with that. So I wasn't ever expecting my family to be involved right now with this sort of stuff, but I guess having good relationships is part of it, and also just being bootstrapping and resourceful. GDC wanted like $3,500 just to rent some like bottom tier booth stuff, and we could like buy 5 times that amount of stuff for the amount that they're charging us just to rent it. So this is really working out well, and the more we think about it, the more awesome the booth is going to be. We're going to have tons of flyers for different kinds of target markets, activities for people like meet and hang out at the booth, high quality like designs and props, all for like less cost than normally it would be to run things like that. The next step I want to talk about comfort with risk. A lot of you might be thinking about starting companies or in the middle of it, and something I really have to share is just don't try to start an ambitious company unless you're like really, 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 really serious. Like you can't live without doing this and you're going to severely regret not doing it and be willing to sacrifice everything to achieve it. I thought that because I'd spent time in the game industry and built up my network and understandings of things that it would be easier, but I realized that basically our work and our energy expand to fill the time available. This isn't my idea, but I'm seeing it's more and more true, where I'm more relaxed when I have less of a gun underneath me. For example, I helped organize a Connect Ukraine festival, but now I wouldn't do that because I don't have the time and attention for it. Last week I went to a Make-A-Wish Foundation because I was curious to like see about volunteering or helping, but I realized that I actually shouldn't get involved because there's a team that depends on me. We have limited funding, all this stuff is coming up, so I really have to focus, and it's because of the scarce resources that enforces this focus. And so because of the nature of this, there's been a few times already on the track of GameTree where I'm like, oh shit, like I don't know what I'm going to do past like 4 or 5 days or a week or two from now, and things look like it could be the end, and somehow things keep coming up. It's almost like the staircase keeps building itself as I'm going. It's not been a sort of perfect master plan where everything plays out and is as fast as I expect or happens like I expect. So for you, expect that things will run really uncomfortably close to the edge, where there will be people that you might have to fire that depend on you, or you might have, for example, now I have like almost all maxed out credit cards. And that wasn't a situation I was expecting to find myself in because I started off with an okay amount of money, raised some funding, and was also working towards the beginning making decent money. But I didn't know I'd be in a situation where I almost have where I have a lot more negative money than not. And like, because I'm very committed to this, it's not much of a problem. But if somebody wasn't as committed, they would jump out right now because the risk is really high and they would have wasted years of their life and tons of their funding. So try to be not doing something unless you really care about what it is, and if your own personality is one that can be comfortable with risk and be able to like actually still be happy during this time period, because you're not going to be able to do things if you're not happy, if you're not comfortable with that risk. Had a meeting with somebody who's done a successful crowdfunding campaign in gaming. That's something I was kind of taking a last second look at and talking to a couple platforms about, because I think it's better to have the community own something and a lot of stakeholders than necessarily just a few. It's something I thought of a long time ago and want to do in the future. But after talking more, I realized that it's not the best thing to consider right now, because the limit on how much we can crowdfund without huge amounts of paperwork and costs is actually not nearly as high and as useful as if we were just to raise a private seed round. And we could still do the crowdfunding later and possibly for all future rounds, but with a good foundation, a bigger community, it'll be easier, and we don't have to behold ourselves to risk or to like lower payout in the short term to make sure we actually get to that longer term thing. And lastly is a guy reached out with an email just like, oh, like, can we meet? I want to hear about your vision and like what your plans are. And I was like, why do you want to know this stuff? And then he said that he's thinking about joining up. I assumed it was something like that, but I can't spend the time to just take random meetings. So we end up talking, and we just get along like that. He happens to be from San Diego, coincidentally, the same city in the world that I'm from. And he basically wants to be doing exactly what we're doing, is building a sort of a way to connect gamers. And so this is a perfect phase with what he wants to do. And he's somebody who's gone through a few startups, had a couple like kind of smaller but offers to do stuff, but most importantly is he believes in the cause and is a perfect fit in terms of the personality that we need next. Being in Eastern Europe, we have a good technical side of a team, but it's hard to be able to make business deals and to do a good job with marketing and business development, and those are his specialties. So I almost feel like the universe is kind of like manifesting stuff that's needed somehow at the right time. But we basically talked again. He's going to be working for the next few weeks full-time on this. We're going to be covering basically his minimal expenses and then figuring out how useful he is and giving an offer. And then If that goes well, then he's actually going to meet us at GDC, help run the booth. I'm meeting a friend of his who's like a CTO level person who tends to join him on different activities, and he also has a lot of friends who are developers and designers. And I see him being a good executive or a good leader in the company in the future, so I think it's like really awesome to have met this guy. I'll go into more details if things play out well, but in general, the sort of approach I'm having with it is seeing if values and vision align, and then measuring like, is he a force multiplier or kind of somebody who's going to fill like a niche? And I see that those things are both positive. So he's somebody I'd feel comfortable bringing on, but the few week period is to see what are the results like, offering to cover his expenses so he's not at least losing anything, and then having something in mind but not telling him exactly what it is, because the second you mention a number, people get anchored to that thought, and then if it's for some reason lower than that, then they're going to be disappointed because of lack of expectations. So I made sure, even though I have something possibly in mind, to purposely not mention it even when asked, because otherwise it could just ruin what could be good just by throwing out numbers that are kind of arbitrary in a sense, because we don't do things that rationally. It's more about expectations and feeling fair and fulfilled and stuff like that. But the intention would be to give him a decent chunk of equity and then also a fair payout once the seed round comes in. So I think I'll cut things off for now because that's a lot. I was planning to speak more about investments going on, but I'll save that till next week when there'll be more updates. But things tend to be going well, talking to new people and also getting further development talks with some of the people that are existing.